where we don't concentrate power in one single body, and let's see how that can be done. So that we'll talk about this afternoon. In this whole debate, one thing that I'd like to end by saying, because it's something we need to say everywhere, there has been, I think, to my mind, because I'm a co-convener of NCPRI, a very unfair attempt to paint what we are, the point of view that we are bringing about, as being something that is motivated by the Congress party or the ruling party. I say unfair because in NCPRI, actually most of us have spent our lives fighting every single party who has been in power, because we have been fighting from outside. Not most of us, all of us. There is one member amongst us, Aruna, who is a member of the National Advisory Council, who everyone actually amongst us pushed into the National Advisory Council to push our issues, and there's been a great utility to it also. But people could say there's a use or not use to NEC, but that's a completely separate question. The critique of the NCPRI does not come actually out of to any extent Aruna's relationship with the NEC. Aruna spends 1 or 2 days in the NEC in the month. The rest of the time she's critiquing, even today, whether it's a poverty line, or whether it's RTI amendments, or whether it's anything else. Day in and day out, she's taking positions which the government couldn't possibly be comfortable with. So, what is the problem that we have with that more than anything else, otherwise branding someone or not is okay, is that the issues that we are raising will get swept under the carpet if we do not look at them for what they are worth. We are more than happy to debate shortcomings in the issues that we are raising, because we are also raising issues that we see as maybe shortcomings into the future. And that's where I come to this last point of participation. That is, if we want to participate on an equal basis amongst each other also, we must be able to look into the future to see this is the best we could perhaps get, these are the possible shortcomings, these are 2 years from now. Do we want to come back and say we did so much and finally nothing came out of it, very little change, or even more corruption may have come up in places. So it's something that we need to address properly, and it's our responsibility in terms of participation to address issues for what they are. Whether or not we feel someone stands in one place or another, the issue stands on its own, and it's our responsibility in terms of campaign, in terms of a movement, in terms of an organization, and in terms of being colleagues, co-travelers on this path.
Thank you, sir. The only thing that is constant is change, and RTI is moving towards accountability from transparency. May I now invite the member of National Advisory Council, the founder of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangatna, Mrs. Aruna Roy, to kindly make the keynote address.
Distinguished friends, I begin by proclaiming my natural shortness of height as a handicap. I always disappear behind podiums and speakers, I don't know what these structures are called, whatever they are. So you will please forgive me for moving myself a little away from it so that I am visible and you are visible to me, but otherwise I just about see your noses. So I am very happy to be here with you today, and the issue of participatory democracy is for me a live and critical issue which requires, as a primary demand on all of our sensibilities, the ability to listen to criticism and critical issues without absolute prejudice. The right to information has actually worked to bring facts out into the open so that debates are based on informed choices. The current discourse on which Nikhil left his presentation is that today the discourse on many issues is apparently on facts but based on prejudice. And I think much of the public discourse must, in an effort to find out the truth, find out even positions that various people hold and what actually each law proposes to do, what each suggestion of a bill or a definition of a bill proposes to do before forming opinions and propagating and using propaganda. The unfortunate thing is that right to information, which really is an opposite to propaganda. What is propaganda? Propaganda is taking a belief or a faith that I may have and using it without logic or without causality and placing it in the public domain to influence people's minds. The unfortunate thing is that many of us who are on the RTI bandwagon today are using propaganda instead of information. Information allows the person who hears it to listen, to absorb and to make a choice. Propaganda forces you into accepting what is said as the only interpretation of a truth. I'm not saying the truth, but a truth. Having said that, let me say that the right to information in the last 6 years has established the transparency discourse irrevocably in the center of every debate on governance. Today, it is impossible to start a discourse on governance from the panchayat to the parliament without somehow placing transparency in the center of the debate. And I think it's a huge achievement. If you look back to 1994, when Nikhil and I were struggling outside a BDO's office, asking for a BPL list which we could not get because we were told it was a secret document. India's come a long way. Because today we are accessing records, we are accessing notes, we are letters between the Prime Minister and the Cabinet Minister to see what they are saying to each other and taking it quite normally, though they are reactions from the government. So we place transparency in the middle of the discourse. Whom is it hurting the most? The transparency discourse is hurting the system even today. Yesterday the Prime Minister made a statement with which I completely disagree. He made a statement that the efficiency of government is being harmed by the transparency provisions of the RTI Act. And in fact he said that file notings or confidential letters, the whole gamut of it, is bringing down the inefficiency of his officers. The efficiency of his officers, increasing inefficiency. Sorry, thank you. Actually, if you look back, when I look back on my very brief 7-year period in the government, it was a period fraught with corruption. And I don't know whether it's gone above that benchmark or is it below the benchmark. Couldn't be below. It has to be more. The inefficiency of passing the file and passing the buck is part of bureaucratic inaction. People, even then, when they were not afraid of a transparency application under RTI, still did not note on the file. There used to be, I don't know how many of you have seen government files. There is such a thing as a left part of the file where notings are done. So there would be something written by the section officer which would be fairly in detail, and then they would mark Under Secretary, oblique Deputy Secretary, oblique Joint Secretary, oblique Additional Secretary, oblique Secretary, oblique Minister if it has to go right up. Mostly people would just cross out their name and sign. Because no one wanted to really take the onus if it was a critical issue of an opinion that might be unpopular with the boss. I remember wondering why there were such few opinions cited on the left side of the file. There was also pressure put on decent bureaucrats by political bosses or by senior civil servants, put pressure on their juniors to write the uncomfortable things on the file so that they themselves would not write it but just sign. I think transparency benefits. Civil servants who want to be efficient, civil servants who want to be correct according to the rule, regulations and laws, and civil servants who do not want to get under the pressure of incorrect or illegal decisions taken by political bosses. So those bureaucrats who argue that these transparency measures bring about inefficiency, I contest. And I contest with inside information. This time I'm not speaking as an activist, I'm speaking as an very small period of service, 7 years, but 7 years in the IAS, when I used to really feel that if the file noting became public, I would be vindicated, at least in the position I took. That I didn't have to agree with irregularities and illegal decision-making processes. So I think the transparency discourse, while it is at one level established, is at another level consistently eroded by questions of this sort which come from within the system. And I do think that I would like to answer this, as I did many of the TV interviews yesterday, with a comment that in the last 6 years, what information received by people on very genuine RTI applications, most of them are genuine, has created a huge upheaval of governance, has questioned the legitimacy of political parties or legitimacy of any sets of civil servants or any sets of elected representatives. What has really upset the system are scams. And these scams are scams which have come through, maybe partly through RTI, but partly through other exposures. So I feel that instead of welcoming transparency as a measure and saying irrevocably that it will remain and that it will be so, this persistence within the system to talk continually about amendments is very wrong. And those of us who want to fight to maintain transparency will have to fight this ghost of amendments which come, or maybe the kind of spirit that hangs behind the civil service which keeps visiting us frequently to say amendments must be made. What is ultimately the goal of the RTI that the MKSS designed with the NCPRI and planned in 1994, 95, 96? The idea was not just merely fighting corruption. The idea was also to fight the arbitrary use of power. What is the arbitrary use of power? It's the misuse of power by the state. Whether it declares that you will have to carpet bomb the Maoist areas because that's the only way to destroy the Nakshals, or whether it takes a position on minorities in Gujarat or in Kashmir or any other part of this country, whether it decides to impose the Special Powers Act, Armed Forces Special Powers Act in the northeast of Kashmir or anywhere to suspend democratic rights, it is the arbitrary use of power, which if state decides that its people don't have the right to the freedom of having entitlements under human rights, under fundamental rights, then the constitution is enshrined for us. Recently I met a set of Manipuri youth who said to us that the government and the state has betrayed us, but the people of India have also betrayed us because we are Indians. We are asking for a normal life in Manipur. Because there is a certain set of individuals who might be doing something, you can't put the entire Manipur state under the purview of a law which denies us its basic fundamental rights. And if we go and live in those states for some time, we'll understand what the impact is on people. So there are issues. So arbitrary use of power is also an issue which is part of the RTI battle. And I think if we understand it that way, then a lot of the miasma and the myopia that results in pronounced judgments of many RTI activists will go, because we then see that it is corruption plus. It's not only corruption. So corruption plus is what? So one is arbitrary use of power. The second thing, and what these two lead to, and I think we've been very good and very powerful in using right to information against arbitrary use of power, say in Gujarat. All the victims of the Gujarat genocide, many of them have used RTI to get dignity back. The same victim of a rape or whose family has been destroyed by the genocide has applied to the police, same police station which perpetrated that crime, and they have been given chairs and a cup of tea and they have been given information. And I think somewhere the balance of power, and it's also prayashchit, what we say in India, atonement for the guilt that is collective guilt of the state. At least somewhere you treat them as equals. So it has been used even in the settlement of the arbitrary use of power. Both these things lead to a collective definition and a people's definition of democracy. Democracy is not merely asking for information and putting it into the public domain. Democracy means the realization of the fundamental rights conferred on us through the Constitution, many of which today are in jeopardy. Today we have a very, very fine difference and a very basic difference between India and Bharat. While we talk about India, we forget Bharat. While we talk about India's right to do many things, we forget Bharat. And it's getting worse and worse. Whether it's corporate policy, whether it's the 8.5% growth vying with the BPL. The other day, the Planning Commission said that an urban person could live on 35 rupees a day and a rural person on 32 rupees a day and the rural person on 25 rupees a day. 26 rupees a day. If these figures are to be really examined with the price, cost of living index, price rise, with the predicament of very poor people, it's appalling. Questioning that is my fundamental role in public life. It's my role because I feel living with Bharat and understanding Bharat in the last 40 years is deeply indebted to Bharat for the RTI. Because it's the struggle of the people of Bharat that brought the RTI in focus for India. India joined, but Bharat struggled and continues to struggle even today. So in that entire debate, no matter which political party is in power or which government is in power, the biases are the same. The biases are for India and not for Bharat. So that bias has to be somewhere set right. Right to information is playing an extreme